When I was younger, every couple of weeks in school, a new fad would pop up out of nowhere, and everybody would jump on it. One day you'd be walking down the hallways and you'd see girls on the floor with those paper fortune-telling things, those cootie catchers. And the next day you'd find yourself sitting with those same girls, being told that the cootie catcher predicts that there's no way you're going to pass that day's math test. A lot of fads came and went, but the biggest one throughout my youth was one that I like to call the age of Capiruchos. So what a Capirucho is basically a cup and ball game. It's called a Capirucho in El Salvador, but in Mexico it's called a Valero, and in Japan there's a similar game they call Kendama. So the Capirucho has a wooden handle that has a rope tied to it, and at the end of the rope is a wooden ball, usually in the shape of a barrel or a bell, and it has a hole carved into the bottom that you have to catch with the handle. So pretty much you have to get good at flicking the rope on the handle to make the ball land on it. So it started off innocently enough. Some kid brought a Capirucho to school and he showed it off, and then everyone else started showing up days later with their own Capiruchos. And at first, we kept them in our backpacks, and we only played while walking down the hallways or during recess. So we'd challenge each other at recess to see how many we could get in a row, or who could get the most shots in under a minute. But soon enough, playing Capirucho only during recess wasn't cutting it for us, and people would get a couple of games in whenever the teacher turned his back in class, or they'd ask to go to the bathroom to get a quick fix. So by the time we were into the second week of the age of Capiruchos, people would be playing Capirucho while they jotted down notes from the teacher, or playing it while we were running laps in gym class. And as people became more educated with the game, opinions on it were divided, and lines in the sand started being drawn. Because Capiruchos came in two popular shapes, the classic bell shape and the newer barrel shape. So this gave rise to two differing schools of thought. The traditionalists believed that the bell shape was superior to the barrel because although having a smaller hole at the bottom, it was more lightweight than the heavy and clunky barrel, so it provided longer play times because of it. But the more modern barrel enthusiasts argued that the bigger hole at the bottom of their Capirucho meant that they were making their shots more often, so they were getting more enjoyment in half the time, therefore making the light weight of the bell a moot point to bring up. One side accused the other of not respecting the game of Capirucho and that they were only in it for cheap thrills, but they responded saying that the bells were too stuck in their old ways and that they had to get with the times. So people took their sides, and I ended up joining the barrel faction because I thought the bells looked pretty dumb. So what was once a harmless childhood pastime had morphed into fierce cutthroat competition. The days of kids challenging each other for fun were gone. Now the challenges were set up and moderated by an unbiased third party, and you had to put down some serious cash, toys, or even your lunch to challenge the other kids. And as soon as two kids started battling, a small crowd would form around them and they'd start making side bets on who they thought would win. The Capirucho battles meant everything to us. If you were a top competitor, you were the star in your class and you got the prettiest girls. In the same way cheerleaders feel special when they wear the star quarterback's Letterman jacket, the girls would ask to hold on to their champion's Capirucho for safekeeping when they weren't using it. As the battles raged on throughout the weeks, legendary events kept taking place every day, feeding into our growing mythos and lore. There was the clash at Piedra Negra, which was the time a Barrow Clan player destroyed a Bell player in battle, and to further humiliate him, he forced him to go over to where some huge rocks were, put his Capirucho on the ground, and smash his own Capirucho to bits with one of the huge rocks. We Barrow players celebrated our victory, while the side bettors wagered on how many whacks it would take for the kid to break his own Capirucho. But the Bell faction got their revenge a few days later when our best player was challenged to a battle by their weakest player. We were confident that our guy would win, so we bet almost everything we had on him. But when the challenge started, our player's Capirucho kept getting stuck, and he had to keep prying it apart during the battle. So he got decimated, and we lost all of our toys. We later found out that the Bell faction had paid off our top player's girlfriend beforehand, and she'd stuck little globs of Play-Doh on the inside of his Capirucho before handing it back to him for the battle. This later came to be known as the betrayal of Delmi Aide, and the Barrow clan suffered heavy losses from it. Once the age of Capiruchos had reached its apex, our Capiruchos weren't toys anymore. They were weapons used to uphold our glory and defend our ranks. So people started naming their weapons and customizing them. Some people covered theirs with stickers, while others used Sharpies to color designs on the outside of them. And I remember there were some real standout pieces in the Barrow faction, like the legendary Tambo Prieto, which was as black as a starless night, or El Pijechucho, which was said to be visible a mile away due to its bright crimson handle. The demand for customizing weapons got so high that an older kid a few grades above us set up his shop at a cafeteria table and acted as our blacksmith. He had a backpack that was full of metal compasses of all shapes and sizes. So you'd go to his shop and you'd tell him what design you wanted, and he'd take one of his metal compasses and he'd start scratching the metal tip of it real fast against another surface to heat it up. And while the tip was hot, he'd burn your designs onto the capirucho. We were in our glory days, but little did we know it would all come crashing down in one fell swoop. The teachers at school became well aware of the sudden popularity of capiruchos. One day, the principal made his rounds and went into all the classrooms carrying a huge black trash bag. He told the students to hand over their capiruchos and that we'd all get them back at the end of the day if we promised to not bring in the class anymore. So we regretfully turned our capiruchos in, but by that point we'd grown too bold. As soon as the principal leaves to continue with his rounds, we call a kid over from the Barrow clan and we tell him to go out and scout for us. We tell him to follow the principal at a safe distance while he makes his rounds so that we'd know where the bag ends up being stored. That way we can break in during lunchtime and not have to wait all day to get our capiruchos back. Our scout comes back a few minutes later and he tells us that they've left the bag in the janitor's shed. So we wait until lunchtime and a small group of us make our way over there. We pay off the janitor with some of our lunches so that he lets us in his shed, and he says, "You kids sure like those little toys. There's another group in there already getting theirs back." And we all look at our scout, and one of us starts interrogating him while the rest of us run into the shed. We find the Bell clan inside, and they've already gotten a hold of the capirucho bag. So we rush at them, and a huge fight breaks out, but one of the Bell kids grabs the bag, and he manages to escape. We all run after him, and he makes his way towards the basketball court in the middle of the school. We tackle him and manage to grab the bag, but the other Bell faction kids catch up, and we start beating each other up again. The kids all around the playground see our fight, and they start running towards the court to get a better look. And all of us start tugging at the bag with all of our strength, and the plastic bag rips apart, and it sends capiruchos raining down on everybody in the basketball court. So random little kids start grabbing whatever capiruchos they can get their grubby hands on, and I get down on my hands and knees and I scramble to look for my capirucho, or tambo prieto, or any of our legendary weapons I can possibly salvage from the chaos. So both Bell and Barrow faction members start crawling around trying to recover their stuff, but it's already too late. I turn to see a kid punting the Bell clan's mythical El Quebrado, and it's when I see a kid picking his nose with the once fabled Pijechucho that I know that our empire has fallen. By the time the bell rang for the students to go back to class and the dust had settled, it was all over. With most of our capiruchos having been usurped or lost, there was no reason to rebuild what we once had. The rival factions decided to call a truce, and we promised each other we wouldn't let things get so out of hand in the future. It was a promise we kept, until 2 weeks later, some kid brought some Duncan brand yo-yos to school and showed them off, giving rise to yet another tumultuous age. We moved on to yo-yos, and just like that, our capiruchos went from being our most treasured things we ever had to just another toy that we all used to play with back when we were all younger.